I hate going to the dentist. I know that no one likes going to the dentist, but I really hate going to the dentist. I've got a good dentist. I think she knows what she's doing. Really, it doesn't hurt that much. Very seldom at the dentist's office do you have any real pain. You know, they give you gas to make you not care. They use that numbing topical stuff before they stab you. Half the time you don't even know you're being stabbed. But there's just something about the dentist that is uncomfortable and disconcerting. You know, the way you have to hold your mouth open for 3 hours, the way that the mean lady stabs you in the gums over and over again, the way that you have this awkward small talk that you're not really able to answer because, well, someone's whole hand is inside of your mouth. Besides that, it's expensive, and that really bugs me. Every time I'm in the dentist chair, I think to myself, why would anyone ever become a dentist? And the only answer I can come up with was they weren't smart enough for med school and they don't want to work on Fridays. That's all I can come up with because I don't know anybody who says, I want to go to the dentist. But I still go to the dentist. I go every 6 months and I go occasionally in between. I prefer to avoid things that are uncomfortable. That's really what I don't like about the dentist. It's not even that it hurts. It's awkward and it's uncomfortable. If we really think about it though, we know that in most places in our lives, the places where we are uncomfortable are the places where we tend to grow. It's not in times of comfort that good things happen. In fact, it's times of discomfort that generally cause the times of comfort later in the future. I want to warm up with a personal question today, if you're okay with that. What was an uncomfortable situation in your life that caused you to grow? Discuss and come back when you're ready. So discomfort helps us grow. The problem is we just don't particularly like it. If we're going to follow Jesus, though, we have to follow him to some uncomfortable places. I would love to be a Jesus follower if being a Jesus follower meant that we went to Katie's ice cream all the time. But being a Jesus follower means that we also follow him down the road to the cross from time to time. Let me read to you from 1 Peter chapter 3. If when you do good and suffer for it, you endure, this is a gracious thing in the sight of God. For to this you have been called, because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example that you might follow in his steps. Now, when you read that verse, and the verses that immediately follow it, you start to think about his suffering on the cross. And of course, that's clearly worth thinking about. It's hard for us to imagine the pain, the agony, the flogging, everything that surrounds the crucifixion. But the fact of the matter is, most of us will not encounter a physical cross or the sort of persecution that puts our lives and our bodies in danger. The thing that you and I are most likely to encounter, if even that, is maybe someone who makes fun of us or maybe some sort of financial pressure. But again, in our society, even that is fairly rare. So when I read about suffering with Jesus, I have to think about maybe some other kinds of discomfort. So what do you think that Jesus experienced that was uncomfortable besides the cross? I know maybe this sounds like a silly question because the cross is the big thing, and certainly the cross is the big thing. But in his life, on a random Tuesday in June, what sort of discomfort did Jesus and his disciples endure? I want you to try to take a little bit of time with your group, and I want you to see if you can come up with 10 uncomfortable situations that Jesus found himself in, and they can't have anything to do with his arrest, betrayal, or crucifixion. See what you can come up with. Here's my list. Jesus was homeless. Jesus was misunderstood by his own family. Remember, his brothers rejected him. The people who should have been on board with his mission were the very ones who were in the way of his mission. His best friends flaked out time and time again or fought with each other about who would get to be his best friend. He was hungry, he was thirsty, he was tempted, he worked very long hours and was constantly surrounded by people, and if Jesus was an introvert by any chance, that really got to him. He was poor, as best I can tell. He lost his earthly dad at a evidently relatively young age. People constantly misinterpreted his motives and his words. They gossiped about him, they lied about him, travel was tough on him, and he had friends die. Jesus experienced all sorts of pain, all sorts of discomforts, besides the big discomfort. The prophecy of Isaiah 53 verse 3 puts it this way: He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and as one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. I'm sure there's more that you had on your list that I missed too. Here's the tough passage that I want to share with you. This is John 15, starting in verse 18. If the world hates you, know that it hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love you as its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of this world, therefore the world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. Jesus just said, don't think that you get to have an easier life than he had. Don't expect that your walk on this planet will be easier than his. Now, a lot of us have this core belief deep down inside that our lives should be easy and they should be comfortable. And if it's not easy and it's not comfortable, then something has gone wrong. Anything unpleasant shakes us. Now, nobody I know would say those sentences out loud. You know, if I asked you to raise your hand and say, raise your hand if you think that you should never have a bad thing happen to you, none of you would raise your hand because you know that that's kind of a dumb thing to think. But the problem is, we do actually think it. We just don't want to admit that we think it. We're too sophisticated to admit it. As soon as something bad happens, I say, why me? Or why did this thing happen? Or I don't like it, as if the universe owes me an explanation. Remember what Jesus said. We aren't greater than him. Our experiences should not be greater than his experience. And if he experienced pain, we can expect to experience pain. Now, this is not in the running for the happiest lesson I've ever shared with you, but I think it is an important one. I think these passages that I've shared with you primarily have in view Christian persecution. Okay? I understand that's in the context of these passages. And again, I'm grateful that we don't experience that to any real degree. And before you argue with me about that, you can talk to the people who got fed to lions about persecution and say what you want about Facebook deleting your post. Even though these passages speak to persecution, I think they also speak generally to our fear of pain and our fear of discomfort in living life that way. I want you to read John 16, 20 through 24 with your team. And I want you to observe the relationship between joy and pain in that text. How do joy and pain relate to each other? How are those ideas connected in Jesus? And how does joy connect to our discomfort? Come back when you're ready. Did you notice how Jesus described pain as temporary and joy as lasting? Did you notice how Jesus described pain as productive of something good in that passage? That's not to say that pain itself is good or fun or pleasant or anything like that, but in the Christian approach, pain is temporary, joy is permanent. In the Christian approach, pain, while not good, very often is used to produce good. You've heard that before, of course. James 1, 2 through 4. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you encounter trials of various kinds. Well, of various kinds. What does that include? Well, you know, I almost hate to say, because when you put a big problem next to a little problem, you feel embarrassed to talk about the little problem. But you know, every problem, every pain is a pain. I kind of hate at the doctor's office how they have that pain scale of 0 to 10 because they never really know what to do with it. You know, at the moment, any pain is bad. I can't imagine being alive and having pain that was a 9 or a 10 on that chart. You know, I think that's what it feels like to get mauled by bears and murder hornets at the same time. So I don't know how you use that part of the scale. And what do you do with a 1? Is a 1 on the pain scale just sort of like, I would rather be napping right now? You know, pain is really hard to quantify. And it is really hard to compare. So this is difficult for us. Cancer is not the same as a bad day because one of your friends snubbed you. But you know what they do have in common? They do both hurt. And while if you've just had a bad day, please don't say something dumb to your friend who has cancer. Every type of pain is real pain. You know, it's funny, even sometimes the silliest little pieces of pain are sometimes in a way the worst. How severe is that pain in the middle of the night when you stub your toe on the way to the bathroom? That's a 12 on the pain scale, right? But it doesn't last. It doesn't have emotional significance. But how is the pain when someone you love dies? Oh, wow. Well, obviously it's different. Indifference, the only word I have here. Pain is so strange. What I'm trying to say and what I'm trying to get to is whatever kind of pain it is, when you meet trials of various kinds, whether they are the first world problems or they are end of world problems, consider it joy, because you know that the testing of your faith produces something. Recognize that it is temporary and recognize that it is productive. Remember that in his ministry, Jesus said that those who are hungry, those who are thirsty, and those who are poor are the ones who are really blessed. So if we're going to follow Jesus, we need to expect discomfort. The truth is we're going to experience discomfort either way. So let's expect discomfort. Let's walk with him through it instead of trying to run away from it. I still don't like going to the dentist. But do you know why I go? That discomfort is better than the discomfort of not going. As uncomfortable as it is to go to the dentist, I spent about 8 years not going to the dentist. And let me tell you, the first time I went back to the dentist, it was very uncomfortable. And it was discomfort that I could have avoided if I'd been willing to take on the little inconvenience. Putting off pain only serves to increase it. Better to have a little pain today than a lot tomorrow. In one sense, my life depends on me going to the dentist. Did you know not that many years ago, dental abscesses were the number 5 killer of people living in London? I had one of those earlier this year. And I thought to myself, how strange it is that this thing, which is basically an irritation to me, could have been the end of my life a century before. I go to the dentist because the discomfort is better than the alternative. Avoiding pain is not a viable strategy for life. What would it be like if we learned not to like it, but to embrace discomfort? Or what would it be like if at the very least I learned to stop idolizing comfort, to stop believing that I deserve at all times to be comfortable, never to be challenged, never to be questioned, never to be corrected, never to be in a situation where I don't quite know what to do. You see, our comfort zones keep us from all sorts of good joy and good growth. We're not comfortable talking to someone about Jesus because we're afraid they might reject us. So what do? We don't. And they don't get to hear, and we don't get to tell. We both miss an opportunity. We're not comfortable with healthy confrontation in our relationships. So what happens? Issues fester, grudges linger, things get worse. That relationship ultimately becomes more uncomfortable. We're not comfortable confessing sin. What will they say about me? Will Sister Bertha better than you say something mean? Will they still let me keep my job? Will they throw me out of the church? What's going to happen? So what do we do instead? We cover it up instead of confess it. How did that work out for our friend David? How did that work out in Scripture? I tell you, it's a whole lot more comfortable to confess than to have someone else confess for you. That's ripping the Band-Aid off, isn't it? Maybe the best way to find comfort is to learn to be a little less comfortable. As we close, I have one more question for you. What pain or what discomfort have you been avoiding? What discomfort do the people around you avoid? What good thing are you and they missing out on because of your addiction to ease and comfort? Maybe this question will help you see Jesus a little bit more clearly, and maybe it will open up some doors to some things that you would miss otherwise if we lived our lives only in comfort. Thanks for joining us for our study today.